News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Erica Herskowitz. Stocks closed slightly lower as President Trump's fast-evolving tariff war leaves investors unwilling to take on too much risk following a two-day rally. The Dow fell 156 points, down 0.33%. The Nasdaq lost 8 points. The S&P lost 9. The 10-year Treasury yield is at 4.33%. The 2-year Treasury yield is at 3.84%. President Trump is calling on China to reach out to him in order to kick off negotiations aimed at resolving the escalating trade fight between the world's two largest economies. During a White House press briefing today, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump continues to be deeply involved in tariff negotiations.
He has made it clear to his trade team he wants to personally sign off on all of these deals too. And so I don't want to get ahead of them on announcements. But obviously, as you've heard from numerous administration officials, there have been many talks with countries. We've had more than 15 deals, pieces of paper put on the table, proposals that are actively being considered. And as we've said consistently, more than 75 countries have reached out.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. The European Union and U.S. made scant progress bridging trade differences this week as officials from President Donald Trump's administration indicated that the bulk of the U.S. tariffs imposed on the bloc will not be removed. Bloomberg's Laura Davison says these talks are going to take time.
Basically, no EU countries are at the front of the line for these talks. That's Japan, South Korea, India. They're seeing that they may be in for a long haul on tariffs and that they're going to have to figure that out.
Laura Davison speaking with Bloomberg's Balance of Power. An EU representative left the meeting with little clarity on the U.S. stance, struggling to determine the American side's aims. According to people familiar with the discussions, he met for about 2 hours with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Trade Representative Jameson Greer in Washington Monday. Republicans in the White House, Senate, and House are drafting analysis on how best to craft a new tax bracket for the wealthiest Americans, work that signals the GOP under President Trump is seriously considering ideas to raise taxes on the rich. According to people familiar with the discussions, the House proposal would set the new rate at 40% for taxpayers earning $1 million or more a year. A White House official says Trump is open to the idea of a new top tax bracket. However, he believes the higher rate should kick in at a threshold far greater than $1 million. Boeing shares are lower after Bloomberg News reported China has ordered its airlines not to take any further deliveries from the plane maker as part of the tit-for-tat trade war with the U.S. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Danny Lee.
So Beijing has ordered the carriers not to take any further deliveries, and also on top of that, they have asked the airlines not to take any orders of any plane-related equipment or parts from U.S. companies. So it's quite a broad mandate that they're asking of. And this came at a time last week, in fact, when China retaliated against the U.S. with its own tariffs of 125% on Chinese goods. And when you think just purely on the economic terms of when you buy an aircraft, that kind of doubles the cost of an aircraft over its lifetime, and it becomes unrealistic for an airline to take delivery of. And
Bloomberg's Danny Lee. The order came after China unveiled retaliatory tariffs on 125% on American goods this past weekend. The Canadian government says it will allow automakers to import a number of U.S.-made cars and trucks without tariffs as long as the companies keep manufacturing vehicles in Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking in Quebec on Tuesday.
Companies that have production here who sell into Canada, they will get 100% and maintain that production and investments in Canada. They will get 100% remission on our counter tariffs. So in other words, our counter tariffs won't apply if they continue to produce, continue to employ, continue to invest in Canada.
Prime Minister Mark Carney. Last week, the government put retaliatory tariffs on vehicles made in the U.S. It says it will provide a reprieve for 6 months on imports from the U.S. that are used in Canadian manufacturing, processing, and food and beverage packaging. Meanwhile, Hyundai expects car prices to remain relatively steady over the coming months, despite added costs from the escalating global trade war, as automakers try to maintain stability and keep customers coming to dealer lots. President and CEO Jose Munoz on navigating President Trump's tariff rollout.
We produce in the U.S., we don't produce in Mexico, really maybe very minor, but we took a conscious decision to invest here in the USA. The rest of the production comes mainly from South Korea. We all want to ensure that there is a a plain level field for everybody, so that we can compete in good terms.
Jose Munoz speaking with Bloomberg TV. Hyundai this month pledged to hold prices steady until June 2nd, a step that Munoz says has led to very strong sales in April as customers try to get ahead of any market dislocation. Tuesday, President Trump threatened to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status in a post on Truth Social after the school refused to comply with his administration's demands in exchange for continued federal funding. The government's anti-Semitism task force froze at least $2.2 billion of multi-year grants to Harvard. The school's president argued the administration's demands crossed red lines regarding academic freedom and interference in higher education. Wendy Schiller, director of the Alfred Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy at Brown University.
So that's a big hit to get $2 billion frozen. Harvard may be taking out loans. Harvard may have, donors that are going to kick in. But all of these institutions are making plans now to figure out how to function and not have the federal government tell them which departments they can have, which speech they can allow. This is a real defining moment for higher education.
Brown University's director of the Alfred Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy, Wendy Schiller, Harvard's tax-exempt status provides the school with benefits such as not paying traditional property taxes and selling tax-exempt bonds. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Erica Herskowitz, and this is Bloomberg.